First of all, thank you for such a huge turnout. And I can assure you that this evening is going to be quite intense for me, as well as for you, probably. And if at some point you've had enough of this sinking boat, feel free to stand up and stretch your legs or just walk out. There was a time when I wished I could have done the same thing, but sit there thinking, well, wait a minute, he's jumping subjects. Wasn't he just talking about this 2 seconds ago? And I'm sorry, but that's how my brain is functioning right now. There's a lot that happened on this trip, and I'm still trying to sort it out. And one reason for doing this talk tonight is to say thank you to everybody who showed tremendous support for Lisa and for me. And there's no good if, I'm sure I could have done this in September or October when maybe I'd be a bit more stable, but I don't want to be stable. I want to show you exactly what happened. And for me to do that, there's going to be a lot of choking up here. But that's part of the story. And there's the boat ready to go. And I have never felt so confident. And I kept telling, and this is what is so ironic, I kept telling Inko and Helga, you know, this feels so right. The boat feels tight. There's nothing that I had not addressed. Everything felt just straight up. We took the boat out. This is in the little village of Grindavik, a town of 110 people in East Iceland. When all the work was done, we put her on a trailer, put her in the water, and we did the capsize test. In 2003, when I circumnavigated Iceland, this is Iceland. I had met these two folks who have a small fish factory. I had time. I went over and I knocked on the door, and I met again Margaret and Herman. And they took me to dinner, and then the next day I left. I thought that would be perhaps the last time I would see them. Well, it wasn't. They were there when I came ashore 5 days later, and they took care of me and when I really needed them. Herman and Margaret. And they let me get on a computer, and I looked at the weather forecast, and it was perfect. Very, very light northeasterly winds, and then a dead flat calm once I got offshore. There were no easterlies in the forecast, and nothing coming across the North Atlantic from Canada. An easterly is ideally that's what I would love, to have an easterly, a wind that blows from the east, pushing me away from Iceland toward Greenland, getting enough buffer away from land. That's what an ocean boat wants. There was nothing in that forecast that indicated an easterly, unfortunately, but there was such a light northeasterly, and then this big calm. It was a window that I decided to take. There's only about 5 pictures left, and you'll understand why. This is the day I left, very light winds, and you cannot know how happy I was just to be moving, to be pulling on the oars, to be thinking, I've got 1,500 miles of a voyage in front of me. I wonder what I'm going to see. There's got to be whales, there'll be ice, there'll be seabirds, sure there'll be offshore trawlers. I'm on the edge of this incredible adventure. Winds, there's whales, there's orcas, there's a pod of about 15 orcas, and they're hunting. And they're coming, they're making these bluff runs at the boat, and then they're disappearing. They come within about 50 yards, and then they disappear, and then they'd be over here, and then they'd be spy hopping, and then whacking their tail on the surface, and all of this activity. And this is the first day, and I'm thinking, wow. The next morning, flat calm. This should have been the beginning of that calm that was forecast. And it just gets flatter and flatter. And now I'm 50 miles out at sea, and it's looking like a pond. The foamers are all around me. There are puffins around me. Every once in a while, a whale just, they'll come up and you look around. You're trying to find out where is it? Maybe it'll get closer. And they do. They'll come right up to the boat. And this is the magic of being at sea. And people, no doubt, must ask, well, why do you keep going back? And my question is, why wouldn't I? you know, this is an existence that is so, it's so precious, and it's so, it's such a privilege to be a part of it. And it's risky. I will not deny that. Anybody who goes out on the sea, there's an element of risk. There's an element of risk in everything that we do. But when you go out on the sea, it's a bit higher. During the night, and you know, when do I wake up? It's 2 in the morning, and that's when the day starts. The boat was behaving erratically, and I had gone to sleep 2 hours earlier, and I left the reaching sail up, and we were moving at about 1.5 knots with light winds, and the boat was stable, and I was sleeping. Something woke me up, and I guess it was the movement of the boat. The wind was coming up, and I'm thinking, you know, where's that calm? What happened to that calm? All right, don't freak out. Maybe it's just a local wind. But as that early morning developed, so too did the wind. And it kept climbing, and it kept climbing, and I thought, well, I can still row, and pretty much on a westerly. So I'm rowing. I'm doing the work that I knew that I would have to do, and that I was prepared to do, to learn. So I'm on a westerly, and the wind is picking up, and it's getting stronger and stronger, to the point where I have to take the reaching sail down because there's too much wind, and it's knocking the boat, not knocking the boat over, but there's the risk element. It's too high. So I take down the reaching sail, and then I'm just down to rowing. And now it's big enough, the seas are big enough, and they're coming up the side of the boat, that they're flopping into the boat, and they're knocking the boat around. And again, it's a risk assessment. Okay, what do you do, Chris? This is too much. You got to pull her out of a westerly course, and you're not going to like it, but you got to get onto a southwesterly. So I adjust the rudder, and now I'm running more with the waves, and I'm trying to pull as much of a westerly course out of it as I can. But I'm running on a southerly, too much of a southerly course, and the wind is still climbing, huge. I can remember the last very, very clear memory that I have is I'm back on the sliding seat. I've got the belt around me. I'm tethered to the boat. The oars are just skipping across the sea. I'm not rowing. The boat is doing between 6 and 9 knots. We are screaming down these waves. I've got one hand on the outrigger, the oar outrigger, to stabilize myself. I'm in a dry suit. And the other hand I've got on the rudder control cable. It normally I set it and I leave it in a jam pleat. And then I row. I couldn't row because it was too rough. Working the rudder. And then at some point I'm thinking, no, it's getting way too big. The waves they're over 6 foot. Too many of them are breaking. And at some point, it doesn't matter how big they are. How can you measure a wave, you know, from trough to crest when you're out in it? You just know when they're too much. And they were. So I hauled the sail down. I put the sea anchor out. That's when I called Inco. He said, call me back in a half hour. I call him back, and he says, Chris, I do not like this. These winds that you see now, they might get a little smaller tonight. This is 10 o'clock in the morning when I'm calling them. They might get a little smaller tonight. Then there will be this very small calm tomorrow, and then for 48 hours, the winds, she will go to 16 meters per second. 16 meters per second is over 30 knots. A 30-knot wind on an already disturbed sea in a small boat is really bad news. So I'm in the cabin, and on my back, and the boat is now pointing into the waves. I've got the sea anchor out, so we're not running with them. Now the bow is pointing north, and the waves are washing over the boat, and they're starting to batter it. And I have to make a decision. Do I call for a rescue? And what does that look like? And whose life do I put in jeopardy? We had a rescue plan intact. We had it written down, and we wrote that plan out, and I agreed to it. Once you agree to a plan, you don't back out of it. I call them back and I say, "Go, I don't like this. The winds are going up. They're not deep. They're not coming down. They're increasing. I can hear them now, and there's a whistling through the lines of my rigging." And so I say, let's go with the plan, Nico. And he says, yes, I do think this is the right thing to do. So he starts it. Before I left home, I bought an insurance policy, a search and rescue, or rescue insurance policy, before I left home. For $17.50 a month. I mean, how can you go wrong? Being the big spender I am, I opted for it. In that moment, I'm talking to Inko. He's a search and rescue guy. We don't need a worldwide search. I've got the best people on the phone, and the plan is in place. I didn't activate the SOS part of that inReach device, and because I didn't activate it, the insurance, I couldn't claim the insurance. And I told him what I was going to do, that I was going to pay for this rescue. And he said, no, you don't, we don't do that in Iceland. The businesses, the businesses in town, the trawlers, the fish factories, they support this, you know, they pay for this. I said, no, well, maybe they do. I'm not paying for this. So I asked this man at the table, who was the head of the SAR rescue unit, and he had a figure. And I said, okay, I'll take care of that. And this is where the extraordinary communication and the professionalism just continued from that point on for the next 24 hours. And Inko said, okay, this is what's happening. The search and rescue boat will leave, and they will be on you within 4 to 5 hours. Okay, I set a mental clock. 4 to 5 hours, I can do this. I'm already starting to slide down mentally, and I knew that this was going to happen. I knew that I'm inside this boat, and it's a drum, and I don't want you, I would not want you to hear the noise. It is endless. It is overwhelming. And the boat is moving in 3 different directions. It's getting forced, it's being driven up from the sharp-peaked waves that are right underneath it, and then it drops into the trough, and then it gets slammed sideways, and it rolls to one side, and water comes in the ventilation hatch, and then it rights itself, and it starts it all over again, and it's twisting, and it's diving, and it's all of this noise. My mental capacity after 20 hours in the boat was going downhill. And I knew that was going to happen, and I had a plan for it. At some point, the boat starts this very strange shuddering. And it's not something that I had heard before on any of the other crossings, and I've been in relatively bad weather on those crossings, but nothing that had been sustained for this time. When the boat would hit the bottom of the trough, it would set up this vibration through the hull that I could feel from my toes to where my head was on a pillow of clothes in a waterproof bag, and it was an alarm. Like, what is that? What, has something broken? You know, and I can't go out to look. It's far too dangerous to leave the apartment. What's happening? So that element of doubt, and that is critical when you're in a crisis. You somehow have to coach yourself into staying calm when everything is telling you otherwise. It's very emotional now, but at the time, the emotions have to be shoved away. You can't be mad that they're going to be 2 hours late. You can't be anything but, okay, new schedule, and keep doing your job. Unfortunately, this schedule kept getting bumped. We were down to 8 knots. Lisa, at some point, I guess it must have been on the sat phone, she said, I can see the rescue boat, and I can see how fast they're going. 8 knots. The boat's capable of doing 20, but not in rough water. So that means a long delay. Okay, another delay. Okay, let go of expectations. Shove the emotions away. Continue hanging on. This went on and on and on for 11 hours. For when the big waves came, and I could hear them coming, and now when they hit, they seemed to go right through me. There was nothing between me and the waves. Mentally, neurons were firing or something. I don't know, but some people have said, well, were you afraid? And no, it was beyond fear. Fear is the emotion, but the emotions were not there. It was something primeval. It was something so very basic on a brain level that I was in shock, and every single time those damn waves hit me, I can't even explain to you what it was doing, but I knew I was at that point that I had coached myself. You better beware when you hit that point, you still have a job. Sort of half in and half out of just fatigue and everything. And then suddenly the radio is right on my chest, and I'm looking up at the foam ceiling that I've studied for 32 hours now, and I know every single little crease in the foam, and the foam, the radio just suddenly is right there. And this is brilliant. The first thing I heard on that radio was, "Hello, Chris, hello, Chris." It wasn't the protocol of Northern Reach, Northern Reach, Northern Reach. This is the Grindavik SAR boat, Grindavik SAR boat. There's nothing like that. They knew how critical I must be. They didn't. I mean, how would they know? They made the assumption because they're professionals. The first words was basically my name, and that was a huge boost. That was a massive they said, can you give us your GPS? Give us your lat long. Lat long. All of that happens, and now I have to just read the damn thing because, the can't hold my hand. They're right on. Where are they? They must be close if they're asking for my lat long. But, geez, what if I get the numbers wrong? I'm sending 50 miles away. So I'm thinking, geez, and I've got my glasses on, and I read him the number, and I say, do you copy? Do you copy? SAR rescue, this is Northern Reach, do you copy? Nothing. I have to assume I've lost comms. There's no time to get on the sat phone. The kite. Get the kite in here. Yeah, they'll see that. And I'm laying there. I bet it took me 10 minutes to talk myself into getting out of that compartment and getting that kite in the air. I convinced myself 1 second, and then, no, don't do that. It's really, you're too close. No, just stay where you are. What if they can't find you? It could take another 2 hours. Can you hang on for 2 hours? The kite, you're right. Gotta do the kite. There are like these two voices inside of me, and I'm trying to convince them both to come to the same agreement. Well, let's stop arguing. Let's just get the kite moving. And at some point, okay, I have to have a plan. All right, I'm going to put the kite in the air. And what's the sequence of events? Unlock the hatch. The first thing you do is reach through, get the belt, and put it on you. And then leave the hatch. Get the kite, slam the hatch closed, and lock it. Lock it. Lock yourself out. Because if I don't, that hatch could open up, it could fill with water, and now I don't have any safe refuge. And I jump back into the compartment, and I'm freezing, and I'm cold, and I don't know whether it's cold or just fatigue or adrenaline, but I'm just shaking like a leaf, and I lay down, still got the radio on, and then the radio comes back on. Just, there they are again. Hello, Chris, this is search and rescue. Yeah, hello, I hear you, and we see your kite. We see your kite. I can hear the excitement in their voice. And the other thing that they said was, we are 3.5 miles away. We are coming. And oh man, those were welcome words. Then I did hear it. And it was that unmistakable, heavy growl. But I started pulling in the sea anchor. And what I noticed as I'm doing it, which is weird, is that I'm pulling in even loops, and I'm gathering the loops in one hand and pulling in with the other, and I'm holding on to those loops because I cannot screw up. I cannot allow those loops to just fall willy-nilly in the boat and then step in the middle of it and then try to get up on the boat, and there's a loop around somehow things were gelling. And this was pure adrenaline, because there was nothing else that was driving me at this point. It was paying attention, it was seeing details, there was a clarity that was ice cold. It was, this is what you have to do. Pull the sea anchor in, and he positioned his boat so that I didn't slam into it. He was moving his boat downwind as I was coming onto him really fast sideways. And we did collide, and we collided hard, but it would have been a lot more violent had he not known that boat very well, and if he was not the skipper that he was. He just did everything perfectly. And then at some point, the last bag that I threw up was the electronics with the camera, the GPS, and the sat phone, and my communication gear. And I threw that up, and my hands are still like this, and our boats came even. The swell picked up my boat, and for a second or two, I was above them, and then as I came down, the diver on board grabbed my hands, and I was out of my boat and onto their boat just so fast, I didn't even know what was happening. And I'm suddenly now on a much bigger boat. And what those guys did first of all was they took me and they pretty much slammed me against the bulkhead. They put themselves between the lifeline, which is very low, and the sea, and they just pinned me there. And then the boat was streaming aft. They had a line on her. She wasn't going to go anywhere. Then they brought me around the fantail, and there was an open hatch, and they just kind of pushed me, not hard, but just kind of, this is where you're going to be. All right, yep. So I stayed out of the way. And then for the next half hour, 40 minutes, they worked like crazy men trying to get my boat on board the fantail of that search and rescue boat. And the adrenaline was gone. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to lay down, I wanted to stand up, I wanted to hang on, I wanted to faint, I wanted to watch my boat. Where is Northern Reach? What are they doing? They should let her go, it's not worth it. No, don't get near that boat. And all of these things are just going through my mind. And then, God, I'm thirsty, man, I'm hungry. What are they doing? So this went on and on and on. And I finally, one guy came close to the hatch, and I said, just let it go, it's not worth it. And so they put me down below. The navigator took me down below, and there was a bunk. And he said, do you want me to, very broken English, do you want me to help you get out of your dry suit? I said, no, I didn't want it. It was safety. It was what kept me alive. I wanted it on me. So he put me in the bunk, and then there was this big, heavy white blanket, and he put that over me. And he said, now we will go back to Iceland. And he turned to go up topside, and he turned the light out. And what a gesture. And it sounds so small, but right up until he had me in that bunk, he was taking care of me. There was such a look in their eyes. The skipper had a half smile on his face. Just this calm, as if he had just come in from walking his dog. The navigator, just, okay, this is what we do. The diver said, yes, we are very happy you are alive. And the engineer said, yeah, now let's look at the engines. It was all of this very non-dramatic, they didn't add anything to what was happening. I think if anyone had even rolled their eyes at me or frowned, I would have died. And later on, and I'll tell, there's another part of this whole story. Later on, I asked, how do they select these men for this job and all of the search and rescue jobs? And they said the biggest part that they look for is that element of compassion. Because when they are pulling somebody off of a mountainside or out of the sea, they are dealing with a human being. And that's why the first message that I got on that VHF was, hello, Chris. They weren't dealing with a statistic. They were dealing with a human being. And the Icelandic people, they live from their hearts. They are a beautiful people. And the cream of the crop are the search and rescue men and women. We got back, and I didn't have any shoes. I didn't have any clothes. They loaned me a pair of boots to pull over my dry suit. And then Margaret and Herman, the owners of the fish factory, they knew the boat was coming in with me, and they met me there. And they took me home, and they let me get cleaned up. They found some clothes that mostly fit, and they fed me. They gave me a place to sleep for 3 or 4 days while I recovered, and I needed that. I was really, I was in very, very bad shape mentally. And so we set up this, for lack of a better word, this presentation. And the 4 men came. They walked right up to me with their arms wide open. And that just left me at the top. All 3 guys and then the skipper. So they sat down, and Margaret had arranged to have coffee and cakes as they do in Iceland. The table was overflowing with food, and I didn't like it, but I was standing at the end of this long table with these 10 or 15 men and 2 women, and the skipper was right here. And I wanted to explain to them, I didn't know whether they knew the whole scope of the trip. This journey had started in Scotland. It didn't start in Grindavik, so I told them very, very briefly that story. And then I said that I had something for them, and I walked over and I took this oar, and I held it out to the skipper, and I said, "This is, this was mine, and now it's yours, because you saved my life, and you came 100 miles offshore." And so I looked at the skipper in the eye, and he was cheered up as badly as I was. The sense of closure. I called Inco, and I called Palmy, and those guys started it. They started the rescue communications, and they stuck with it. They were awake for every hour that I was awake. So I don't know, and this is the problem. I don't know where the story ends, and for me, it hasn't ended, but it has ended this evening. I was thinking about doing this evening, and I said, I don't even know why, because in the past I've come back from these various trips and I've achieved a goal, and I've been able to share with people stories about the people that I met and the wonderful things that happened and all this stuff that I learned, and I feel like this time I'm coming back and I'm busted wide open, and I've lost so much, and I need so much help. And Lisa said, you've probably come back with more from this trip than any other trip that you've done. And she's dead on. She's absolutely dead on.